Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on Episode 5 of Spy Family Season 2. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So last we left off, Yor had received word of a new assignment. And that's the intriguing bit, because outside of little snippets here and there, we haven't really seen much of her doing her stuff. You know, there's implications of superhuman constitution and things like that, but we've never really seen the intricacies of her actual job. Now, what we do know is that she's affiliated with the Garden, and given that her sort of code name is the Thorn Princess, there's a lot of, gardening-related metaphors and things like that. I mean, you know, this guy here, he's literally tending to a garden and pruning things, you know. I don't think it's any coincidence that he seemingly would attempt to prune Yor here. Of course, you know, she's on top of her game, so there's no real threat. But yeah, I think that's a little hint right here. You know, I was worried your skills might have dulled since you got a family. The implication here being that a family is a detriment. Or at least it is in the eyes of the Garden, potentially. So now we're getting the real information here. Now, what's interesting is that we're actually getting the background. Normally, how things go is that Yor's told, you know, there's somebody who needs killing and she just kind of does it. At least that's how things have been alluded to so far. But knowing what I know, this isn't a usual sort of thing. Instead, Yor is charged with protecting these people. Which, I mean, when you hire an assassin to protect people, that seems kind of perverse and silly, but I suppose the Garden isn't strictly about killing people necessarily, even if they don't shy away from it. You know, it is kind of interesting because they're effectively protecting a mafia family from other assassins. And there is some merit in it, seeing as how one of the people Yor is charged with protecting is, you know, at best a toddler. You know, I don't think it's wrong to protect a toddler even if their parents aren't very good people. However, I feel like there's a lot of gray and gray morality going on here. I mean, I guess when you come down to it, Yor's on the right side, if only because she's trying to prevent the loss of life. But, you know, we don't know much about this mafia family. We don't really know much about the assassins either. Although it is interesting that Yor herself is admitting that it's been a little while since her last job and, she might not be, I guess, fully up to snuff. Now, you know what? It's always nice when Yuri joins in and, man, the poor guy, he can never catch a break. He does want to spend time with his sister, but, that whole fake family arrangement, he thinks it's real and he hates it. It is kind of an interesting counterpoint that the Garden thought having a family would be a weakness or something that would get in the way of Yor's skill as an assassin. But if we recall from the first few episodes, it was taking care of Yuri that first prompted her to get into the business. So, I think the Garden's kind of misguided here. I mean, from their perspective, I can sort of understand why, maybe having a family would take the edge off your murdering skills. But at the same time, family provides motivation. And, that's another interesting point that Yor's bringing up. If Yuri's grown and can take care of himself, does she really need to continue working this job? I'd imagine the answer is, no, seeing as how she doesn't need the money, she has another job. But at the same time, I'd imagine the Garden, they wouldn't be too keen on losing operatives. And they would probably be unwilling to let somebody just walk away from the business. So I feel like Anya, I think she knows exactly what's going on here. I mean, just like that, she knows this is a scam, but, she can read minds that might give her the leg up. It is kind of convenient that everybody's sort of thinking through their plan. But at the same time, can you credibly accuse a child of cheating like that? I mean, I guess it's kind of convenient that this guy's thinking such snide thoughts. Oh, dear. Now, I can only imagine how smug Anya's going to be about having actually won. And, this no doubt throws a wrench into everything, because Anya gets to go on the boat, which means Lloyd has to take time off. I'm sure Wise won't be too happy about that. Yeah, Lloyd's instincts aren't exactly wrong. It's mighty convenient that Anya won this grand prize. But at the same time, not everything's a conspiracy. So isn't that interesting? Just by sheer happenstance, Yor's going to be on the boat too. And despite any lies she might say to the contrary, she's there doing assassin work. And while this might be terribly exciting for Anya, this is a really big wrench that's been jammed into the gears of everything. So, to Anya's credit, she's at least considering the implications of things. On the one hand, she doesn't want to cause trouble for Yor, but at the same time, a boat is really, really cool. It might have been a token resistance, but unfortunately, the selfish desire won out. So I guess that's the other hurdle. Although, now that I say that, it wound up being a bit of a non-issue. Yeah, well, I guess requesting a vacation isn't that bad if you have the backup excuse of Operation Strix, You can't exactly work Anya to the bone. Yeah, I guess it's nice that they seemingly recognize Lloyd as the best spy they have, and maybe a little vacation now and again would be a good thing for him. Now, poor Frankie, he's just left alone on pet sitting duty. He always does get stuck with that sort of thing, the poor guy. Now, this is interesting. Yora's actually considering resigning at the end of this, or, maybe there was a bit more of a sinister implication that, she might die, and she's sort of contemplating her own mortality. Honestly, I think it's the former. She didn't seem nearly somber enough to consider that this might be the end. I'm sure it's in the back of her mind somewhere, but it doesn't bear thinking about, really. I mean, personally, I feel like if you're always considering your own death in a sort of fearful way, it just ruins what little life you do have. Some of those guys seem pretty upbeat for mafia-related or garden-related people. I'd imagine if they really knew what they were getting into, they wouldn't be nearly as happy as they are. Especially if a bunch of assassins are coming after the family they're ostensibly supposed to protect. Now, you know what? It's all well and good that Anya enjoys this cruise ship, but personally, I can't relate. I prefer being on dry land. And you know what? This is exactly why. Sure, it might be a luxury ship and everything, but, the room you have to stay on, it's gonna be a small thing no matter how you slice it. There's only so much room on a boat, and much of that room has to be devoted to, life safety systems and things like that, There's only so much comfort you can cram in if you want to have a whole bunch of people on board. Okay. So it makes sense, Well, I take that back. I think they're all sort of talking in disguise here. Which, I guess makes sense when you take into account that they might be being surveilled. But, they just sort of introduce themselves as businessmen. So I guess that would make sense why those two guys are kind of upbeat and not all serious about everything. And I guess it makes sense that the family would sort of have reservations about Yor, considering her slight stature. Nobody would expect her to be capable of, kicking a car and shoving it, just based on her stature. So I guess this guy, to his credit, he seems a little reticent to trust Yor, if only because she's on her own, but, at the same time, I kind of understand. They have to look around, establish a perimeter, try and suss out some of these assassins beforehand. It wouldn't do to let them get the drop on you. I mean, I guess, at the very least, Yor's really only concerned with the woman and her son. The the man, he's of slightly less concern. I guess, it'd be nice if he could be kept alive into the bargain, but that's not the sort of victory condition Yor's playing for. This is going to be an interesting conversation, I think. Seeing as how these two are sort of in similar lines of work, they both have a whole lot of danger that they have to deal with. But Yor, like, I guess she sort of did it willingly. Like, if you're born into a mafia family, there's not much you can do about it. But, there's something you can contrast here. I guess part of it has to do with Miss Olka there. Her son is her son, whereas Anya's sort of like an adopted child. Not that there's any less love, but there's sort of like a difference in biological imperative. And I guess there's also the sort of tragedy that the husband is dead. And Yor, knowing what little she does know about Lloyd, she could only picture herself in that same spot. If something like that were to happen, no doubt she would feel rather poorly about it, I imagine. No doubt she would do her best to raise Anya and all that, but, she only knows part of what's going on. So this is the twist. Miss Olka here, she's been in hiding ever since the first assassination. And, she's in disguise, assassins abound. You really don't want to raise a high profile. And, going out, stretching your legs, seeing the ocean and all that, that's not exactly big flashy behavior. But at the same time, it's an unnecessary risk. Now, she's not exactly garden management or anything, so I don't imagine she would consider something like this. She's very clearly watching out for the enemy and all that, but at the same time, I don't think she has the right frame of mind to say, hey, I'm not gonna let you do that. It's an unnecessary risk. Now, poor Anya, she can't help herself. It's one of those things, I think, where kids just sort of say stuff, He's saying, hey, let's explore the boat before it sinks. It's not going to be doing that, in all likelihood. Boats are, pretty sturdy. However, at the same time, you can't rule out a little Titanic or, Costa Concordia type incident here. Especially if there are assassins running around trying to kill people. So it's interesting that Yor's confiding this. Her family doesn't know about her profession, whereas Miss Olka and her husband, they both sort of knew. So this is a big key difference. Yor's shady behavior is just kind of hidden and all that. And Miss Olga's even sort of implying that, your family's camouflage, it's not a real thing. And I think it's safe to assume that we, the audience, know that not to be true. Even if Yor is somewhat doubtful herself. I feel like that's kind of a crappy thing to imply, that, you don't really love your family, they're just a disguise. Man, I guess if I were in Yor's position, I'd be saying, you can stay in your cabin this entire time. You're not going outside. Now, I guess the idea of disguising Yor was that she looks far more unassuming, but at the same time, I feel like Miss Olka's heart's kind of in the wrong place. The idea is, your husband won't recognize you in different clothes. when she should be more worried about assassins suspecting that you might be their quarry. Yeah, I mean, now she's just sort of like lounging on the deck too. I feel like, it would be one thing if you just go outside, catch some fresh air, head back in. But if you're staying out for a prolonged period of time, no doubt the assassins have a profile that they're looking for. A mother and a small child. I feel like any assassin worth their salt, they would assume that their targets are in disguise. But, if you're a mother and child, there's only so much you can disguise about your physical characteristics. Oh, dear. So there we have it, they were perhaps slightly incautious, parts of the ship were bugged, and I get the feeling that they might have slipped a detail that they shouldn't have. I'd imagine that name, Graham, that's probably, meaningful to the assassins. Now, at the same time, if they're monitoring all these bugs simultaneously, that's gotta be, a pretty difficult thing to do, but, I mean, I guess that's pretty clear. Graham, just like his father, that's all the guy needs to hear to know that that's probably the target. If he can isolate the bug and it's sort of like an addressable device, he knows where it happened, where they likely are. I mean, just like that, they sort of gave up the game. Yours got her work cut out for her. Alright, well that's it for this episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.